For years you have quietly carried a truth within you, a truth so profound, so transformative, that it could alter the very fabric of their reality. You, the quiet storm, have been silently observing, knowing all along what others could not, what others refused to see. They laughed at you. They mocked you. They dismissed your insight as nothing more than a wild fantasy, a mere figment of your imagination. They called you delusional and made light of your visions. And yet, here we stand, at the precipice of a moment that you foresaw long ago. A moment when they can no longer ignore the undeniable truth you have been carrying. Studies have shown that human nature often leads people to reject truths that are uncomfortable, that challenge their deeply held beliefs or disrupt their sense of security. It's a natural defense mechanism, an instinctive grasping for what's familiar and known, even when it leads them down a path of ignorance. They cling to their misconceptions, holding them tightly as though their lives depend on it, convincing themselves that ignorance is somehow easier, safer, even blissful. But in reality, ignorance is nothing more than a ticking clock, slowly robbing them of time, of opportunity, and ultimately of growth. And now, the very individuals who once ridiculed you, the ones who called you insane for seeing what they refused to acknowledge, are beginning to see the truth. They are piecing it together, slowly, awkwardly, like characters in a poorly written mystery novel. But unlike the fictional detectives who eventually figure it out, these people are stumbling, clumsy in their realization. They're realizing that you were always 10 steps ahead, that your foresight was not a delusion but a vision grounded in a deeper understanding of what was to come. Their eyes, once filled with skepticism, are now wide with disbelief. Their forced smiles and hesitant glances reveal the truth. They have come to the painful, yet undeniable realization that they were wrong. They were the ones who misjudged you. So, what is it that they are truly questioning now? The question on their minds, though unspoken, hangs heavily in the air. Have we been the fools all along? And the answer, as clear as it is undeniable, is yes. Yes, they have been the fools. They were blinded by their pride, their fear, and their inability to accept that the truth could come from someone they had once dismissed. But do not feel sorry for them, for their awakening is not your burden to bear. In fact, watching them now, stumbling over their own missteps, might be one of the most satisfying forms of entertainment you've experienced in a long time. You've waited for this moment, the moment when the truth rises to the surface, when they can no longer deny the wisdom you've always carried. Let them squirm, for their discomfort is the price they pay for their past arrogance. Now, as the world shifts around them, and they slowly come to terms with the reality you've known all along, you stand firm, unshaken. You are the one who has endured, the one who has held the truth in silence, knowing that it would one day speak for itself, and that moment has arrived. Welcome, the anointed ones, the ones who were too blind to see before but are finally opening their eyes to the truth that you have always embodied. Their journey of awakening begins now, but for you, it's just another step on the path you've been walking all along. 1. The curse of being ahead of your time. The hardest part about being ahead of your time is knowing that people will reject you, not because you're wrong, but because you're too far ahead for them to understand. It's not that they don't see what you see, it's that they can't. Your insights challenge the world they're comfortable living in, and that makes you a threat. People cling to their illusions like lifelines, and when you bring a truth that could shatter those illusions, it's easier for them to laugh at you, mock you, or call you crazy than to face what you're offering. This rejection isn't personal, even though it feels like it is. It's fear disguised as ridicule, fear of change, fear of being wrong, fear that everything they've built their identity on might be a lie. When you stay consistent, when your truth doesn't waver even in the face of their scorn, they can't ignore it forever. Time does its work, and reality catches up. When that moment comes, when they finally realize you were right all along, it hits them like a tidal wave, the shame, the regret, the bitterness. They don't just feel foolish for doubting you, they feel betrayed by themselves for not seeing it sooner. And here's the twist: deep down, a part of them always knew you were right. They just weren't ready to admit it, even to themselves. Now they scramble to rewrite the narrative, pretending they were never against you or acting like it was obvious all along. But the truth lingers: the person they dismissed, the one they underestimated, was always the one holding the answers. As they try to reconcile the past with the present, one thing becomes painfully clear: their disbelief didn't stop the truth, it only delayed their understanding. 2. Knowledge they mocked, now they seek. The most ironic thing about being dismissed is that the same people who laughed at you eventually come back, not with apologies, but with questions. The knowledge they once mocked is now what they desperately need. At first it's almost amusing to watch the shift: the arrogance melting into confusion, the skepticism turning into curiosity. But there's something deeper at play. They didn't just reject what you knew, they rejected the idea that someone like you could know it. It's not that your insights were flawed, they just couldn't accept that you had clarity while they stumbled in the dark. Their mockery wasn't about you being wrong, it was about their inability to understand. Now that the truth is undeniable, they feel the sting of realizing they wasted so much time ignoring the very person who had the answers all along. The awkwardness comes when they try to act like they've always respected you, as if the past never happened. They might try to ease into it with casual questions, pretending it's no big deal, but you can see the shift. Their voices carry a hint of hesitation, a silent admission of guilt. They wouldn't say it outright, but their actions betray them. They're learning slowly that your intuition wasn't luck and your insights weren't guesses. What they don't realize is that you're not angry at them. You never needed their validation in the first place. But watching them scramble to make sense of it now is bittersweet. Part of you wants to say, "I told you so." But the bigger part knows it's not necessary, they already know. And as they rely on the very knowledge they once ridiculed, you understand the deeper truth: their doubt was never your problem, it was their lesson to learn. 3. The power of silent confidence. There's a unique power in silence, especially when you know the truth. While others are busy shouting over each other, trying to prove how much they know, you've stayed quiet, not out of doubt, but out of certainty. You didn't need to convince anyone, because deep down, you understood that the truth doesn't need defending, it only needs time. That silent confidence, the kind that comes from knowing exactly what's going on while everyone else scrambles, is unsettling to people. It challenges their need for validation. In a world addicted to noise, silence is intimidating. Your quiet presence, paired with the weight of your knowledge, unsettled them more than any argument ever could. They couldn't figure you out, and that bothered them. People don't like what they can't explain, and your calm in the face of their chaos felt like a riddle they didn't know how to solve. Instead of admitting they might be missing something, they dismissed you. But now that time has caught up, they're starting to see the cracks in their loud certainty. They're realizing that the silence they mocked was actually strength. The patience they mistook for indifference was you watching them learn the hard way. And here's the twist: they resent you for it, not because you were wrong, but because you didn't try to prove them wrong. It's a tough pill to swallow when someone who stayed in their lane ends up being the one who had it figured out all along. They realized that while they were chasing applause, you were quietly winning. Now, as they look back, they're haunted by one thought: maybe if they'd listened to the quiet one, they wouldn't feel so lost now. 4. Fools play checkers, you played chess. While they were busy chasing quick wins, caught up in the thrill of instant gratification, you were working with precision and patience. They saw life as a series of short-term moves, reacting impulsively to the moment without considering the bigger picture. But you were playing chess while they were fumbling with checkers. You didn't just see the next step, you saw the chain reaction, the ripples spreading far beyond what they could comprehend. They mocked your restraint, mistaking it for hesitation. They laughed at your strategy, convinced their shortcuts and flashy moves would put them ahead. What they didn't realize was that every impulsive decision they made was setting the stage for their own downfall. They weren't just playing poorly, they didn't even understand the rules of the game. They were in a position where the difference became glaringly obvious over time. Their small wins didn't add up to anything meaningful, while your deliberate moves built momentum. You anticipated their mistakes before they even knew they were making them, and now they're stuck, trapped in a position they can't escape, a checkmate entirely of their own making. The beauty of it all is that you didn't have to rush or prove anything. While they wasted energy scrambling, you stayed calm, confident in your long-term vision. Now that the board is clear, they see it too. They weren't just playing the wrong game, they were playing against someone who was always 5 steps ahead. The realization stings, not just because they lost, but because they underestimated you. They thought you were being overly cautious when in reality, you were building a strategy they couldn't even begin to grasp. Now, they're left to pick up the pieces of their impulsiveness while you move on, having already won the game they never even understood. 5. The burden of the all-seeing eye. Knowing too much too soon is a heavy burden, one that most people can't understand. It's not a gift, it's a weight you carry alone. When you see things for what they truly are, when you understand the patterns, the motives, the outcomes before they even unfold, it doesn't make you feel powerful, it makes you feel alienated. The world around you operates on illusions and surface-level thinking. When you pierce through that, people don't see you as insightful, they see you as a threat. It's not just that they don't believe you, it's that they can't handle what you're saying. The truth you bring isn't gentle, it forces them to confront realities they've spent years avoiding. They call you dramatic, paranoid, or even delusional, not because you're wrong, but because you make them uncomfortable. Their ignorance isn't accidental, it's willful ignorance. It lets them sleep at night, while your knowledge keeps you awake. Over time, you learn to stop sharing. You've seen the way their eyes glaze over, the way they scoff and roll their eyes, clinging to their false sense of security. You realize that no matter how much you want to help, you can't save people from truths they refuse to face. So you carry it alone, pretending you don't see what you see, pretending it doesn't hurt to watch them stumble toward inevitable consequences. But when the moment comes, when reality hits them like a freight train, and they finally grasp what you've known all along, it's not satisfying. It's bittersweet. You don't feel vindicated, you feel exhausted. Being right doesn't undo the loneliness you felt while they rejected you. It doesn't erase the burden of seeing the truth long before anyone else was ready to face it. 6. The truth wasn't the issue, it was who it came from. You could have handed them the clearest roadmap, the simplest solution, or the most undeniable facts, but their ego wouldn't allow them to accept it. It wasn't that they couldn't see it, it was that they couldn't handle the idea of you being right. To admit you were right would mean admitting they were wrong, and their pride just couldn't take that hit. Instead, they chose to reject you not because your insights were flawed, but because their arrogance demanded it. To them, accepting your truth felt like giving up control, like acknowledging you were ahead of them. They couldn't stomach the thought that someone they underestimated had a perspective sharper than their own, so they dismissed you, not realizing that in doing so, they were setting themselves up for a fall. Now, as reality catches up, their pride is the only thing left in their way. They can no longer deny the truth you stood by, and the humiliation stings. It's not just about being wrong, it's about knowing they were wrong about you. The walls they built to protect their egos have crumbled, leaving them exposed. They realize now that their arrogance wasn't strength, it was their weakness all along. And here you are, standing steady, just as you were before. You don't need their validation, and that only makes it harder for them. They have to swallow the bitter pill of knowing that their pride blinded them, not just to the truth, but to the person who could have guided them to it sooner. Their ego was the enemy they never saw coming, and now they're left to wrestle with the consequences of their own misplaced arrogance. 7. The painful gift of foresight. Foresight is often romanticized as a gift, but in reality, it's a double-edged sword. Seeing what's coming before anyone else does isn't empowering, it's isolating. You carry the weight of knowing what could be avoided, watching as others walk blindly into mistakes you've already warned them about. They dismiss your insights, brushing you off as overly cautious, dramatic, or even pessimistic, and yet every step they take confirms what you already knew. The cost of their ignorance isn't just theirs to bear, it's yours too. You're left to endure the frustration of seeing time wasted, doors closed, and lessons postponed. You could have helped them avoid it all, but they refuse to listen. Every missed opportunity feels like watching a house burn down, knowing you had the water to put it out, but no one believed you had the hose. What they'll never understand is that foresight isn't painless. It doesn't come with a sense of superiority or satisfaction. It comes with scars, emotional ones, from carrying the weight of truths no one else was ready to face. It's the loneliness of standing in a room full of people and realizing they won't believe you until it's too late. It's the exhaustion of seeing how much could have been saved if only they had trusted you. Now that reality has caught up with them. They're scrambling to piece together what they lost. They see it now, the time, the opportunities, the lessons they ignored. They regret it. But for you, their awakening is bittersweet. While they're just beginning to feel the sting of what's been wasted, you've been carrying it all along. The painful irony is that you weren't just ahead of them in knowledge, you were ahead of them in grief, mourning what could have been long before they even knew what was at stake. 8. Vindication feels bittersweet. There's a strange kind of satisfaction in watching someone finally come to the realization that you were right all along. It's the validation you've waited for, the proof that your instincts weren't just wild guesses, but truths they couldn't see until it was too late. The smiles, the apologies, the awkward attempts to explain themselves, it's all a little bittersweet. Yes, you're vindicated, but there's a sharp edge to it, a quiet ache that comes from knowing how much could have been avoided if only they had listened when you first spoke. So much pain, so much chaos, so many opportunities lost. It didn't have to be this way. The path they're now walking is one they chose through ignorance, stubbornness, and pride. And while it's satisfying to see them finally admit they were wrong, that satisfaction is quickly tempered by the realization that their mistakes were never about you. They didn't ignore you because you were wrong, they ignored you because they couldn't face the truth. And that hurt you more than anything. The hardest part is that you saw it all coming, the pitfalls, the setbacks, the dead ends, and you wanted to help, to guide them toward a better way. But you couldn't make them listen. You couldn't force them to see what they weren't ready for. Now, as they scramble to put the pieces back together, you can't help but wonder how different things could have been if they'd trusted you, if they'd been open to your perspective. Vindication is sweet, but the price is heavy. Watching someone else pay for what could have been prevented, knowing you carried the solution all along, leaves you with a hollow feeling. The truth is, it never had to come to this, and that's the part that stings the most. 9. The mirage of superiority shattered. For the longest time, they carried themselves as though they were untouchable. They looked down on you, mistaking your patience for weakness, your humility for lack of ambition. To them, their loud confidence was proof of their superiority. But now, the mirage has shattered, and the truth is impossible to ignore. What they thought was control was nothing more than a carefully constructed illusion. Their certainty wasn't built on solid ground, it was propped up by insecurity and the desperate need to feel important. They paraded their so-called achievements, compared themselves to you at every turn, and convinced themselves they were always a step ahead. But that's the thing about illusions, they only last as long as no one looks too closely. Now the facade has crumbled. They see that what they mistook for your weakness was actually quiet strength. While they wasted energy posturing and pretending, you were building something real. You weren't competing with them because you were never playing the same game. And now, they're standing still, realizing they weren't ahead of you, they were running in circles, fooling themselves. The bitter part isn't just that they were wrong, It's that they see how obvious it was all along. They see now that their arrogance blinded them to what was right in front of them, and the hardest pill to swallow. You never needed to tear them down or expose them. Their insecurities did all the work for you. The truth is undeniable, they were never superior. They just thought they were because they couldn't see beyond their own egos. Now exposed and vulnerable, they're left with the uncomfortable realization that the person they underestimated was never behind them. You were miles ahead the entire time. 10. They never understood the cost of truth. The truth you carried wasn't just a matter of knowledge, it was a sacrifice, a weight that no one else seemed to understand. It wasn't something you chose lightly, it was something that came with a cost. While they lived in comfortable ignorance, you were alone with the consequences of seeing what they couldn't. You endured ridicule from those who mocked your caution and solitude from those who couldn't bear the weight of your clarity. You stood firm in your truth, but at what cost? The emotional toll, the isolation, the constant second-guessing. It wasn't easy. You didn't just know the truth, you felt it long before anyone else was ready to face it. Now, as they scramble to catch up to what you've known all along, they're beginning to feel the burden themselves. The very truth they dismissed is knocking on their door, forcing them to confront what they didn't want to see. They're learning in real time that knowing the truth isn't a gift, it's a responsibility. It's not just about being right, it's about carrying the weight of that truth through thick and thin, even when no one else sees or understands. But they're unprepared for it. They never had to endure the ridicule, the isolation, or the internal battle of carrying a truth that didn't fit the world around them. They didn't realize that with great knowledge comes even greater loneliness. Now that they're faced with the harsh realities, they're overwhelmed by the emotional cost they're paying, the regret and frustration. It's only the beginning of what you've already lived through. The burden of truth was never light, but you bore it in silence while they were blissfully unaware of the weight they would one day carry. And now, as they try to catch up, they realize too late that the truth was never just about knowing, it was about enduring. 11. The fear of you was always the root. The truth they couldn't face had nothing to do with you, it was about what you represented. You were a mirror to everything they refused to acknowledge about themselves. You weren't just offering knowledge or wisdom, you were offering the potential for change, for growth, for the dismantling of the comfort they built their lives around. And that, more than anything, terrified them. It wasn't that they didn't understand what you were saying, it was that they feared what it would mean if they accepted it. You weren't just challenging their opinions, you were challenging their entire way of life. The lies they told themselves to avoid uncomfortable truths, the stability they relied on was fragile, built on denial and avoidance. And you, by simply existing and speaking the truth, became the catalyst that threatened it all. Their resistance wasn't ignorance, it was self-preservation. The more you spoke, the more they recoiled. They didn't want to hear it because listening meant they would have to face the consequences of their own actions, confront the lies they told themselves, and take accountability for the choices they made. And that's what they feared the most, the idea that they weren't as in control as they thought, that their carefully constructed world was based on shaky ground. So they rejected you, dismissed your wisdom, belittled your insights, and pushed you aside, not because they didn't see the truth, but because embracing it meant undoing everything they'd built. They feared what you represented, transformation, truth, and a challenge to their ego, but in doing so, they only sealed their own fate. They delayed their reckoning. The fear of facing the truth about themselves was stronger than any rational thought. In the end, it was that fear that made them blind to the very wisdom that could have set them free. 12. The most unsettling consequence of realizing the truth is that it doesn't allow for retreat. Once the veil is lifted, there's no going back to the comfort of ignorance. That's what they're grappling with now, not just the weight of the truth itself, but the loss of the illusions they clung to for so long. You didn't just show them the truth, you shattered their safe little world where denial kept them insulated. They can't unsee it. The lies they told themselves, the excuses they made, The justifications they leaned on, they're all transparent now. They see how they deceived themselves to avoid accountability, how they mocked you to shield their own insecurities, how they chose ignorance because it was easier than change. And now there's nowhere to hide. The truth you revealed wasn't just about the world, it was about them. Their flaws, their fears, their failures. What makes it worse for them is knowing that this change wasn't on their terms. You didn't force them to accept it, but your presence, your persistence, your refusal to back down made it impossible for them to look away forever. They see now what you've always known, but instead of feeling empowered, they feel exposed. Their inability to deny the truth anymore makes them feel foolish, not because they were wrong, but because they spent so much time fighting against the inevitable. Now they're left to navigate a world where every comforting lie has been stripped away, and while they may grow stronger for it in the long run, the immediate sting of facing themselves and realizing they could have done so much sooner is what haunts them the most. They didn't just lose their ignorance, they lost the illusion of control. And that's a truth they'll carry forever. In the end, being the one who is chosen, the one who sees the truth before anyone else, is not about basking in the spotlight or savoring the moment when others finally realized they were wrong. It is not about the superficial joys of vindication, nor the satisfaction of proving yourself right. Rather, it is about the quiet, unyielding strength required to bear the weight of truths that others are not yet ready to confront. It is about the emotional and psychological endurance needed to walk a path that few dare to follow, a path that, at times, feels like a lonely journey into the unknown. It's about seeing the world for what it truly is, with all its flaws and imperfections, while those around you remain comfortably trapped in their illusions, unable or unwilling to face what you already know. As time passes and others begin to catch up, when they finally awaken to the depth of your understanding, to the breadth of your foresight, it will not feel like a moment of triumph. It won't be a victory where you stand on the mountaintop, arms raised in celebration. Instead, it will feel like a quiet release, a soft sigh of recognition that you were right all along, but the cost of being right is one you've already paid. You've endured the weight of that knowledge alone, without the comfort of validation, without the reward of immediate understanding. The world around you has been slow to catch up, but when they do, it will not heal the ache of loneliness you've carried. It will not erase the struggle or the sacrifices you've made along the way. Let them catch up. Let them finally come to terms with the reality they ignored for so long, with the opportunities they missed, with the choices that could have spared them pain and regret. You no longer need their validation. You no longer need them to acknowledge the path you have walked or the truths you have uncovered. You have already forged ahead, and that is enough. The truth, while heavy, has made you stronger. You have become resilient in the face of doubt, steady in your pursuit of what is right, while others remain blinded by their egos, their fears, and their unwillingness to challenge the comfortable lies they've been told. The road you have walked was never easy. It has been filled with obstacles, with moments of doubt, and with the silent agony of being misunderstood. But as time goes on, you will find peace in knowing that while others were trapped in their own illusions, you were steadily moving forward. While they clung to the safety of their ignorance, you were building the foundation for a future they could not yet see. Your strength is not loud or brash. It is the quiet, patient persistence of someone who knows that progress doesn't always come with applause. It doesn't come with accolades or recognition. It comes from within, from the belief that your path, though difficult, is the one that leads to true understanding, true growth, and ultimately true peace. So, as they scramble to catch up, to understand the truths they once ignored, you will stand not in triumph, but in quiet acknowledgement. You knew all along, and in the end, that is what matters most. You didn't need the world to validate your journey. You didn't need their approval to know that you were on the right path. The quiet certainty you carried with you, even in the darkest of times, was all the victory you needed. It was your resilience, your refusal to compromise, your willingness to stand alone when necessary, that sets you apart. If these words resonate with you, if you have felt the weight of these truths in your own life, then do not let this moment pass you by. The journey you are on, this journey of self-discovery, of growth, and of embracing the truths that others are too afraid to face, is only just beginning. There is much more ahead, and trust me, you will not want to miss what comes next. The journey is long, and it is not always easy, but it is always worth it. So, take a moment to pause and reflect, and then take the next step. Hit that subscribe button, join the tribe, and let us continue to uncover the truths that the world prefers to overlook. This is where the real conversations happen, the conversations that challenge us, that make us question everything, that push us to learn and grow in ways we never imagined. These are the conversations that, though difficult, are the ones that truly matter. Do not remain a passive observer, watching from the sidelines as others stumble in their ignorance. Step into the movement, be a part of this journey, and let's walk this path together. You've already found the way, and together we will continue to uncover the deeper truths that so many are too afraid to see. God bless you.